Nothing untoward on the videos. Perfect. Okay. I would like to acknowledge that many of us here, I am here on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples, the Squamish, Stolo, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam nations. And there are approximately 200,000 Indigenous people in British Columbia. They include First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. There are 198 distinct First Nations in BC, each with their own unique tradition and history. Please feel free to write your own land acknowledgement in the comments. And Sarah Peebles, whom we're introducing, is actually based in Toronto, Ontario, which is on Treaty 13 lands, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaty signs with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. Special thanks to Jen Wooden, our technician today, and Bonnie Zan for doing amazing publicity. It's such an honor to introduce my friend and colleague, the brilliant Sarah Peebles. I have been following her work online for many years, and I was so lucky to meet Sarah when she popped out to visit a few years ago, and we nerded out over bees together at the Sharing Farm in Richmond. We have also had wonderful conversations on the phone about bees, politics, and art, life, the universe, and everything. Sarah is what's known in the industry as a triple threat: installation artist, composer, and improviser. She is a gifted musician. Sarah pursued violin composition and theater studies in her native Minneapolis, Minnesota, and received a Bachelor of Music degree in composition in 1988 from the University of Michigan School of Music at Ann Arbor. She also took workshops in electronic media at Inter-Access Electronic Media Arts Center in Toronto. In her education abroad in Japan, she studied contemporary music, gagaku court music, and Shinto pantomime theater music. Much of her audio practice has focused on digitally manipulated found sound projected via loudspeakers and/or physical objects, as well as developing distinct approaches to acoustic and amplified improvisation on the sho, which is the Japanese mouth organ used in gagaku. She has released several recordings, which include this instrument. Now, Sarah's installation practice focuses on resonating bodies projects initiated in 2008. And I encourage you to check out Sarah's Resonating Bodies website, which is rich and fascinating. What's wonderful about her work is its creativity, originality, but also its integrity. Sarah follows intensely researched scientific protocols on the best practices for working with bees, scientifically and ethically speaking. She also collaborates with scientists and other artists, which takes a whole other level of expertise. And so with that, I give you Ms. Sarah Peebles.
Thank you, Lori. Yeah, it's really a pleasure to be here, and I'm really honored to be asked to talk today about my art, and obviously it's an honor to be able to hang out with you, Lori, and learn about what's going on in BC and what you've been doing yourself as an artist and as a bee enthusiast and a writer. Today I wanted to talk about the Dwelling series that I started a few years ago, and that is why I guess today's talk. I wanted to talk about engaging our senses and engaging our sense of place. So why don't we start with a video? I wanted to start with a video I had made a while ago because it is the most efficient way of introducing everybody to this series of installation works I've been creating. And then I can just jump into where that has taken me. So let me just bring that video up. Oh, I hope you all just heard me. Maybe you didn't hear me. I had to turn my volume up. Again, thank you for the really kind introduction. In case you didn't just hear me now, I'll say it again. Thank you for such a kind introduction. going to play this 6 minutes first, and then we'll get into talking about where my art has been going since I started in 2008 with this series of bee-related art projects.
Hi everyone, I'm Sarah Peebles. I'm an audio artist in Toronto, and I really love nature and I love being outdoors. I have an interest in ecology and in biodiversity and in biology. And about 12 years ago, I started making art that would create a mental image of biodiversity. It's not such an easy thing to do because usually we read books to get biodiversity information, but how do you do that with art? So it's been a journey. It's been a really interesting journey in creating art that investigates and tells the stories of native bees and pollination ecology. Since 2008, I've collaborated with and brought together people from many different skills to realize these installations, including technicians, visual artists, carpenters, poets, data visualizers, photographers, editors, and scientists who advise me and sometimes with whom I collaborate. Nature of the materials and here that the pollen is squishy. You can actually hear the pollen is squishy when they're unloading it, and that their legs are fairly brittle against the wood. I'm designing and building nest sites that foster the art and science of observing native solitary bees and wasps and their role in pollination ecology. So these projects are aesthetically compelling, of course, but they're also immersive. That is, the cabinets, which I'm calling audio bee cabinet.
Wow, so this seems to be having some issues buffering. Not quite sure what to do about that.
Maybe just give it another try and see how it goes here for a second.
Immersive. That is, the cabinets, which I'm calling audio bee cabinets or sensory nest cabinets, they allow us to look into the cabinet through some plexiglass with a magnifying lens, such as a loupe, while we're wearing headphones. And so we're hearing what we're watching. So what I'm doing is I'm pairing magnified views of nests in tandem with amplified sound of what's going on within the nests. And I found that hearing what we're watching, all of it very small, creates an enhanced perception or a higher fidelity of perception than simply looking or simply listening. It's what we could call an emergent property, that's to say, an experience of these senses combined, which creates a sort of new or unique sensory perception. Those of us who have both sight and hearing experience this in our everyday life, but not with really tiny things. So you get a really immersive, almost tactile view of nesting activities of these bees and wasps, the materials they use, the pollen or stunned insects they bring in to provision the nests their life cycles from egg to larva to pupa to adult, and also the really rich ecology of these tunnel nests, which includes competitors like cuckoo bees and cuckoo wasps, earwigs, spiders, mites, fungi, and other nest biota. Some are parasitic, while others are either mutualists or do neither good nor harm to the nesting solitaries. And we also get a really good window to their dynamic relationships with the surrounding habitat, because these nest sites are outdoors and are permanent. Land use is another really important topic I'm trying to address in my installations. Ecosystems support native bees in the web of life, which they in turn support. My friend USGS biologist Sam Droege points out that we can assist pollinators by cultivating landscapes which self-generate structures found in nature so that they may thrive. So while I ask myself, how can art mimic chaotic structures, which is a really interesting question, I see my arts, at this point at least, as helping to bring the conversation about land management to a broader audience. For example, my recent nest site dwelling, Shenandoah Valley at the State Arboretum of Virginia, is situated at the junction of 5 different land use areas: a community garden, an unmanaged field, managed collections of woody shrubs and trees, a managed restored field, and marsh with native plants, and just beyond conventionally farmed fields. So this art is contemplative and it's also fun. And it feels really good to be outside, giving the spaces we love a new view, enhancing our connection to nature and to the habitats that we take care of.
Okay, so what I would like to do here is go to some photos of what we were just looking at. And so the last set of images that we saw on the video were of Dwelling, Shenandoah Valley. And I started this series Dwelling, as I mentioned, a couple years ago, around 2015. I felt that the audio bee cabinets were doing a pretty good job, but that it would be more interesting if they were situated in environments that drew focus to what was going on. I think people engage with the art much better when they're able to focus on the art without other distractions. And that's kind of a tall order, it seemed to be. So this is a nest site, a site for native bees, a native bee nest site that is created in an area that has native bees that don't exist it's a group of native bees, of mining bees that don't exist in Ontario. We do have Anthophora, but not the kind that make nests out of mud like this. And these guys exist in some parts of BC and the Gulf Islands actually as well. Anthophora and a couple other groups of bees will make nests in vertical banks, whether that's by the ocean or riverbeds or whatnot. There are many kinds of Anthophora, many species. This species, there are several species that do this as well. So I wanted to make a habitat wall, and I was introduced to this concept of bees nesting in walls we might make through Sam Droege, who has his own cob house in Virginia, where a lot of Anthophora have taken up residence. And one thing led to another, and I started making various walls. This is the second iteration of dwelling. And so I'm integrating the cabinet. You saw the cabinets in the video, which are allowing us to see what stem nesters do. Twig and stem nesters, solitary bees, of course, by introducing a cabinet here that has a wood plank that attracts these stem nesters, integrating it into this wall made of cob, essentially. And as you can see, the outside of the cabinet has a lot of really beautiful wood burned art. Over the years, this pyrography has been done by various different people. And for the past several years, I've been working mostly with Marianne Alberga, who is just out of Toronto now. And these are Marianne's illustrations. So Marianne and I will confer ahead of time. I'll give her a list of specific bees and plants I would like to have on each side of the cabinet. I'll be pretty detailed. And then Marianne will decide how to set it, which is the advantage of being able to work with illustrators. And my skill set's pretty limited as far as being an audio artist, a sound artist, a musician. I don't have illustration skills. So working with Marianne and everybody else I have been working with is just a really wonderful experience, and brings the art to a level I could not do by myself. So the nest plank, you can see, is quite long and has a lot of tunnels, and it's actually double-sided in a mirror image. So on the other side of this plank, it has a mirror image of these tunnels, but of course different things will be in the tunnels because they choose what they're going to be doing, which I think is pretty cool. The electronics created by my partner, Rob Cruikshank, he designed and fabricated this audio interface. And so it becomes reasonably easy to figure out when you're there. You can understand that you have some headphones and an easy to use interface, but you sort of need some good signage to help you understand that you need a loop so that you can see things up close and very, very dynamically with a loop and headphones on at the same time, which you can't do. You won't experience the same thing if you only use a loop or you only use headphones. It's really designed to do this together. Of course, not everybody will view it the same way, and everyone will come away with something valuable, I think, no matter how they engage with the work. Yeah, and I should say the cabinetry is beautifully made. In this case, it's made by Jennifer Wrong in Toronto, really great cabinet maker. So a lot of planning and co-planning ahead of time. We're all engaged with one another in creating a design that's going to work. So I have to come up with a lot of information for everybody about what I need in a cabinet or in the listening end of things, or as I mentioned, the pyrography end of things. So this is I think this is year 2, these photographs that Ben Sullivan took. And Ben Sullivan I happen to be blessed with a great photographer cousin who happens to live nearby in Virginia there. And I think we've got some pugnata, some megachile, different leaf cutting bees that year, as well as different wasps going on that we can see in these photos. There's a wasp
in both of those photos, above and below. And in time, this changes, it's dynamic. That's another reason why I'm interested in this form, in making a dwelling. So that brings me to, the topic of dwelling, right? It's a place that you can focus your attention to the bees that are at this dwelling, and the wasps and the other life that you might see. And you can stand inside and focus your attention outside and get a nice opportunity to dwell on the interactions, what plants the bees and wasps might be visiting, using for nest material, using for provisioning their nests, what their life cycles might be. You can also dwell on how these things are dynamic and how they change in time, especially for this community. This was a great opportunity to make an installation for a very involved community. This is the State Arboretum of Virginia, also known as Blandy Experimental Farm. It has an interesting sort of a little bit complex relationship. Blandy Experimental Farm hosts, in a way, I don't know if I can say hosts, but it's a large area, and the State Arboretum of Virginia is within this this experimental farm. I'm sure that maybe the curator will, if he was here, he would correct me, Ty Ralston. But this was a really great opportunity to work with a curator who himself is a native bee researcher, and so could bring to this project a level of involvement that's really rich. So their community involves a lot of different people who might be gardeners, who might be stopping by the university. I'm just going to take this back here. Just to focus on this, people might, be coming to garden. They might be out horseback riding, believe it or not. There's a horse trail there. They might just be walking around, or they might be an educational group from a school, or people in the community who quite often visit this arboretum, which is a very low-key arboretum, by the way. It's not a place that has a wedding hall. You can't even get a cup of coffee here. It's just a place, it's an arboretum that has grounds and a bathroom and a beautiful renovated building area that serves as offices, but it's not, I really like this arboretum because it's not commercial. It's not been commercialized. It's in the full sense an arboretum of different collections of plants and even habitat types to enjoy. So Ty brought to this also, really great signage, and this is an example of some of the signage. As an entomologist and a botanist himself, he is, like I say, able to create a richer experience for the community by bringing good educational and scientific skills to bear on science and the curriculum that he's created. He's actually created a curriculum to go with this site. And I really like this, that he created, the top is cut off. It's a wall of their own. So the mining bees and a couple other Anthophora and a few other genus that might eventually find this place are going to be changing this wall over time. And we did introduce the mining bees to this wall through the help of Sam Drogi, the entomologist that I mentioned earlier, who works for the USGS and has his own house that parts of which are made of cob. The cob exterior has a lot of mining bees in it. And he had some mud bricks, basically not bricks, but mud buckets of mining bees that some grad students had set up at his house, and a few that I think he set up on his own to collect mining bees that, felt like using those mud buckets in addition to his house to live in. So we translocated those to here. I wanted to make sure it didn't take 4 or 5 years for mining bees to find this wall. And yet it's not that far away, so it's not a big deal. There are mining bees in this place already, because Ty has seen them flying around, but nobody knows exactly where they live. Blandy is a really large piece of land. I forget how many acres. I think it's more than 500 acres, with some forested areas and various places mining bees could be living, and evidently are living. That's the long artist statement. I'm not going to get into it, but that's part of the signage. Yeah, so as you can see from the photo, I created a site here, a nest site that draws you in, and I wanted to be, I guess, creating an area that invited you to walk inside of it. So it's a sort of semicircle, or maybe we could say it's sort of a horseshoe shape. And you do feel quite intimate inside of this, and looking out to the grounds around it. I'll show you some more photos of the grounds around it. Yeah, I'm just going to go right into, I think, the next. So I'm assuming everyone can hear me okay, is that right? Or do you have to turn yourselves back on to hear me?
We can hear you just fine.
Okay, good. Yeah, I guess we can see the photo well enough. So you see, I drew a little circle where the site is, and to it's not exactly a north, south, east, west orientation, but to the northeast are the unmanaged fields that have been growing with all sorts of who knows what for a long time, unmanaged areas. To the southwest on the other side is the Virginia Native Plant Trail. It's an area that's been revitalized. It's been planted, with native plants, and extensively revived to be native habitats. But south of that, you can see there are farms. There are conventional farms, actually. That's also a part of Blandy that they rent out to farmers. To the east of the site are managed shrubs, like a lot of different kinds of pine trees and woody shrubs. And to the west, to the northwest, is the garden that you can see here to the northwest. Right on the other side of the blue circle is a fairly sizable community garden with a very active group of people that have their gardens there. There is a building you can see beyond the parking lot, and that's on top of a hill. It's a kind of a teaching area, lookout area. And so that's the situation. I didn't ask for a place that I could create this work of art that would be at an intersection of all these different kinds of habitats. It just happened to be like that. And I realized that that's a great opportunity for people to think about
land use and try to investigate that if they like, investigate where the inhabitants of the wall and of the cabinet are going to be getting their nesting materials, and what they're going to be pollinating or visiting. That aerial shot is showing the garden a bit more as the work was in progress getting made, with behind it unmanaged field. So you can see some of the pine trees on one side of it, a little bit of the garden there you see beyond it. That's the back of it. And we did put those 2 styrofoam boxes of mud that already had our mining bees from Sam's house there. And we can move those around. So once they start inhabiting the wall, which they are, and the wall gets more and more inhabited every year, of course, because they aggregate, the nesting aggregation, we can move those boxes around if we want. And that was intentional. You see people on horseback, by the way, in the corner, the lower corner of this photo on that trail. And you can see the garden behind here a bit. Someone's in the garden there working away. And there's Ty Ralston, one of the boxes. I think the bees are still going on in the clay nest, the mud nest that we brought from Sam's, but they are beginning to dwindle, the population, and that they're only going to want to inhabit something at such a high density for so long before they decide the wall is a better choice. So their tie is plugged into the cabinet, and you can see the inside door of the cabinet also has some information for people to look at about exactly who you might see in the cabinet. I don't know if he decided to use a loop. I think Ty probably visits this every day to see what's going on and keeps track of exactly what bees are there. Really interesting thing about having this installation at Blandy is that Ty has a professional knowledge of the situation there regarding bees that are invasive. It's a really warm place. It's a hot place. It's Virginia, although this is not as hot as Southern Virginia, but it's still really hot. And he doesn't want to be breeding, more invasive bees by giving them free rent, as it were. And so he's actively trying to make sure that bees that are not native don't proliferate in the cabinet. I don't think there's as much choice with the wall, but so far it's Anthophora abrupta, which are native to there. And sometimes you get little mud nesters on the side. I think those guys are really cool. I'm not good with my wasp genera, so I apologize about not being able to name our wasps as well as bees. That, I think, is probably a rotundata. Yeah, Ty said as much. It's a leafcutter bee, alfalfa leafcutter bee, which are, I think, Eurasian, that have been brought to North America, both Canada and the US. But actually that insect, that small wasp there, has just taken over the rotundata nest tunnel. So that's another cool thing about this way of working with native bees through art. It's an intersection of art and science. Things are changing over time in interesting ways and interacting in interesting ways. And so, like a dead log out in the environment, we're able to get an idea of the kinds of interactions that are going on that are a bit more
complex, especially when you're using a loop and getting really close. Here we see, tripoxylin, different kinds of mud nesting wasps. And again, the pugnacious leafcutter bee nests. I think I see a mud nest, wasp nest at the beginning of one of those tunnels. There's a grass carrying wasp, Isodontia nest. And that's the second year, I think that's year 2020, of what the wall started to look like there once the Anthophora started to take hold, the mining bees. And those are like little turrets that they make. Nobody really quite knows why they make these turrets. There are theories about these turrets maybe serving to be regulating heat and moisture, or places bees can be hanging out in the morning and warming up. Those are some theories about that. And there's one of the Anthophora. You see, they look a lot like bumbles. So you could mistaken Anthophora for a bumblebee. I should mention that at this installation and at the iteration of dwelling that came before it, which was more of a community effort in making at the University of Maryland, we've been providing water at each site, even though there is water somewhat nearby. And they're pretty big bees. They'll fly pretty long distance to get to water or pollen or resources. But this way, with water nearby, people have an opportunity to see how important water is. And I want to mention that that is an important part of creating the title for these two installations, the first two iterations of dwelling. This is Shenandoah Valley. I'm not naming it after a river, but after a water, I want to say watershed. That's not quite right. Shenandoah Valley is a larger geographic area than a single watershed, but it encompasses quite a few important rivers, or is bounded by quite a few important rivers that eventually flow into Chesapeake Bay. So I'm hoping to give people a sensibility of geography, as well as or how the geography is tied into the habitat that they're observing and engaging in. And the first iteration of the dwelling series in Maryland is near a creek, so we called it dwelling. What did we call it? We named it after the creek nearby, which escapes me right now, but we'll get to that in a bit. So before I pause, I'm just going to go to a brief video. And I apologize that the video isn't working so well today, but you can see a little bit here. This is from the first dwelling at University of Maryland, and my co-creator was Lisa Cooter, who at the time was a PhD student studying Anthophora. She's just about done with her PhD, which shifted slightly in its focus, but she's been a great collaborator, taking videos all along the way.
Hey, Sarah, while that's playing, I have a question.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Ken says, are there any particular materials for the clay to encourage them to build, and where do you get that?
So this video of Maryland, the Maryland project, that was really fun and interesting. The University of Maryland is constantly constructing. And so they have sites all around campus where they're digging up clay. And so Lisa, being a grad student there in Dennis Van Egelstrop's B Lab at the time, had access to vehicles and volunteers, and created access to vehicles and volunteers. And they went to all these different work sites that were quite close to where we were, and had many different colors and kinds of clay. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go to the second video, and I'm going to keep talking because that shows you that a little bit better. It's a little bit jumpy, this video, but this is like 2 years later. This is last year. So the wall looks kind of monochrome, but that's because they had to plaster over the wall so it wouldn't melt in the rain. There was a lot of erosion on this wall because the design of the wall was not terribly robust. We didn't have a great roof over it. So this material we did in a bunch of different layers, and we experimented because we didn't know if the bees would prefer combinations of sand, like how much sand do they want? How much sand is too much sand in a cob mixture? So you've got clay will be different everywhere you go, always. This is a great garden created by Olivia Bernard, who at the time was a grad student working with master gardeners on a bee course. It was BID research. It was a project with master gardeners at the time. So the wall was able to benefit from this great garden, and continues to over the long run, so long as, you know, it is able to stand. I hope that they are able to do some repair work and keep it going, because it should be robust for a super long time.
We had another question about the type of the roof structure on top as well.
Yeah.
Is that to help protect the clay from dissolving?
Yeah, so there are these two installations both have roofs. And I'm wondering which order I should go in here. You see that this, I'll talk about this one a little bit. Dwelling Paint Branch Creek, that's the name of the creek. They created a little wall here, not a wall, a small roof, green roof that I would say, you know, does a sort of okay job as a green roof. It's not super robust, but at first we didn't have any roof. We just had a bunch of stones we hoped would, you know, keep the erosion slow, and we were wrong. But it had a little roof. Let me see if I can find a part of this video that shows that roof. It has a little roof over the seat, let's just say that, that was made actually by Eric Cooter, Lisa's spouse, who took an old cedar play set apart and kept it from going in the garbage, and took it apart and created a kind of a roof over this installation, at least over the part where you sit. And I'm having a hard time finding that in this video, but the other roof in Virginia is really substantial. There was a quite a healthy budget for that project, and there were architects who were structural engineers involved in the project, and so that's a hurricane grade roof that it will be robust enough in a hurricane, which was a substantial effort. And the purpose of the roof is to keep the cob from melting. Yes, it has to be covered. So I'll answer the question a second ago also about, here we are. So this is the model, the clay model for Virginia. It started off also with a kind of a living green roof idea that we were going to put all along the spine, and it didn't come to pass for structural reasons. So we built the kind of roof you saw instead. And so again, there's the aerial view that shows, well, plan A, and plan A was changed substantially. These are, like I've said, I'm really indebted to the people who I work with. And in this case, in particular, the two people who were the builders were Brian Redmond and David Waterhouse. And they did most of the cobbing and built the roof, and were really incredible people that we're very, very lucky to have. And all of the clay and earth used in this project was from, I want to say 500 feet from the site, about a 5-minute walk, just, not even away, because they had already started getting mud from a particular part of that field. I don't know why, but it was already starting to be excavated, or in the past had been used as a place to get some clay or some mud. So all of the mud is from nearby the site at Blandy in Virginia. And integrated volunteer help in, and Zach Kahn was one of the builders who was involved as well, and was involved in, as well as Ty, in getting volunteer help. So this was a local person volunteering. I wanted to say there are inclusions. I don't know what to call them other than inclusions. In making the wall, wanted to do some experiments with seeing if the mining bees gravitated towards particular spots. And if they did, are we going to see the turret that they make, the chimney, is it going to be a different color than the exterior? So we can have high clay content, we can have very fine sand, straw. The straw was from a farm very close by. The aggregate was local as well, delivered by an aggregate company. Aggregate as in sand, a lot of sand. So here's a different, we did a 4 or 5 or 6 clay inclusions. So here we have deeper subsoil, high clay content, 1-to-1. Depended how deeply you dug in this ground, you'd get different kinds of clay. I should mention that, these kinds of mining bees will be found on upturned trees. So a tree in a forest with a muddy bottom gets blown down, it will have a large mass of earth on its root ball, and that is one place you'll find these bees. As I mentioned, riverbeds are other places you'll find them. And along the ocean, there will be cliffs where you'll find them as well, if you're near the ocean. So at first, we had these poles in for the reason of making a kind of a green roof as well. And we ended up taking those poles off. Well, we chopped them off basically to shift our plan in making a different kind of roof that was self-supporting. So none of the none of the force of the roof is in contact with the wall. And you're in BC, most of you, I suppose, and anyone on the West Coast in particular, whether you're in Oregon, California, Washington, BC, probably you're familiar to some extent with cob. And cob building is found all around the world. That is, earthen buildings of one form or another are found in many, many parts of the world, and have been, of course, popular in climates where they do well. That's another talking about how did we build this, because there was a lot going on to make it happen. So these are just some photos of what it looked like before it was done, as it was getting built. All those holes are structural to creating the cob. So David Waterhouse was the lead build here, and this is when we were finished pretty much before the final stage. The final stage was with Gabe Franklin, who's an artisanal plasterer. So the really interesting equation for me, adding to all of this, was how do I create patterns or some sort of way of approaching the aesthetics of the outside of this wall that would accommodate chimneys of these bees that will go randomly. They will happen randomly. Who knows what it's going to look like? How do we want to approach that? And Gabe was a really great person to work with. This is before we started the pattern making. He suggested smearing different colors of clay into the wall. In this case, it's not, pure clay. It's clay plaster. It does not involve lime or anything that's going to be waterproofing, because the bees will not want to deal with an acidic. I think acidic is right. Let me ask Rob. Lime plaster. Alkaline, sorry, the opposite of acidic. It's not alkaline plaster that involves lime in any way. It's just earthen plaster. And so we had 3 colors we were working with. You can see the white, the brown, and the purplish. So actually, Gabe mixed all those at home, several hours away in Pennsylvania. So this is the part of the of the clay that's not from Virginia. So we pre-mixed this because it is really an art. Plastering is an art as well. And the idea was to smear, blend in those smears, and then work that to be a consistent sort of, what am I trying to say? A consistent surface once we had these blended colors, and then to create lines. So the lines were improvised. Just connect a line, make a line, connect it, make another line, and connect it with a really great effect. And that's what it looks like once the bees decide they're going to start doing something. And I look forward to seeing, where that goes as time moves on. I want to mention that, little details happened. Like, this does not have any line work, but it started. I decided that we should start having the line work start with the curve, which I was really happy with. It looks really interesting. We have some nice natural features, like the beautiful wood that David was able to find that we could contribute to this. And when you're inside, then of course it is aligned, colorful sort of substrate, not substrate, I'm sorry, but pattern that's on the outside. So I know it's already 6. I knew this would happen. It's a good time, maybe, if anyone wants to ask me anything.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I have a burning question, which is once you showed the picture of the bee on the water.
Yeah.
So how do they use that water? Do they take it back and then wet the wall so
I
that
think
they
they-
can dig into it?
I think they put it in their crop and probably wet the wall. That's my impression.
Mhm.
There's a really good paper on everything they do, and I should read it again because it was there was a lot in that paper. Actually, it's from like 1987. But to the best of my knowledge, I'll just say to the best of my knowledge, that's what
Mhm.
happens.
Cool.
But hey, I'm not a biologist, but I just think that's probably true. If you want to see a slight overview, why don't you ask me questions while we
Okay.
look at the predecessors? So this is the first iteration of dwelling that, was involving quite a bit of community and is a lot more funky because it was more of a community endeavor. But it's also farther along, so we get to see what bees get up to.
Cool. So we have a question from Ken. From the audio perspective, do different bees have different dominant frequencies? Could we create chords that represent different species?
I'm not hearing frequencies at all. I'm hearing little, not even that. It's like a, you're like, you hear that? It's like scraping. It
Oh, right.
depends. It's more like you're able to discern a little bit more about what materials they're using by the scraping sounds. It'll sound a little squishy with pollen. It'll sound, if they're using grass, you can really tell. So that's where the loop comes in. If you're using a loop, which is really important, a nice loop is your best friend. Get a nice loop. You'll love it. You'll get an addiction to this thing. And so if you're listening at the same time that you're watching, you will really get a sensibility of materials that are being used and what's going on, or how they are using their body, even just because I think this is the how we perceive things. It's an interesting way we perceive when we're putting our senses together. Sometimes they might buzz, and the buzz will, like when they're fighting. That video didn't play back well, but there was a fight in that video and there was buzzing because there was some aggressive behavior going on. So yeah, I don't know if it's a resonant frequency, but different body sizes will have different buzz sounds for sure.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And Bonnie asks, in the cabinets, do you change out the wood tunnels from year to year?
Yeah, so this is really important. This is part of the design since the get-go in 2010, is that the nest planks are interchangeable. So every site, every venue that I create a cabinet for gets two planks. And if the cabinet just has one plank, and most things that I've created over the last recent while just have one viewing plank. And so you take the plank out after, I would say 2, but maybe 3 years. It kind of depends on what the venue wants to focus on. Because if you want to focus on parasitism, if you want to focus on all of the biota that's going to go on over a while, you might leave it 3 years or something. But if you leave it too long, I don't encourage that, because then you get, kind of a bee sink where more bees will have died because the larva didn't come out right than otherwise would have happened. I wouldn't want there to be negative bees, but it is a small, I don't know how many, if it's 100 holes or so, tunnels, not that many tunnels. I want them switched out at least every 2 years, because then you get to see the entire life cycle and you can watch things pupa become adults and chew their way out, and you can see what kind of competition might go on, and who's going to usurp who, or who's going to make use of a nest over time. Like some leafcutter bees will use, again, vacated nests of wasp using straw using wasps, grass wasps, things like that.
Very cool. So Lincoln says he has a video. Anthophora squirt the water and mud from their butt while building the turrets.
Thank goodness somebody knows the answer to the question. Like I said, I am not a
maybe
biologist.
tomorrow night, if you come to our master melitologist meeting, maybe we could show that video, a
That's
door crasher
amazing.
video.
Wow, that's the first time I've heard that. So this is a teaching, learning opportunity for me. And thank you for bringing knowledge to this. Yeah.
And Ken says, okay, so their bees are percussionists, not guitarists in this case. And then
most of the time when they're in this situation. Yeah.
And Bob McDougall says, I've heard that the sounds, I think, inside our walls while wasps are nesting inside.
Yeah. Actually, I have to say, I am grateful for Peter Kevin for pointing this out to me when I was developing this work in 2009. He's retired now, but he was at University of Guelph, and he was telling me about, I think mud daubers, mud dauber wasps making really great sounds in styrofoam in his garage. And that was really helpful to know. And
Neat.
I did some experiments with styrofoam as well.
Ah, cool.
Yeah. Oh, here's I want you to see too. Yeah, this is the planks, 2 sides of the same plank that year, which it is a mirror image design, but once you look closely, you see that they're not inhabited the same way,
Wow.
obviously. Like, how could they be, right?
That's
Whoopsie.
so cool.
How did that happen? Darn it. Stop it. Computer. Sorry.
No worries. Ava also has a question about paths to the actual site, and whether or not they are universally accessible access paths. Is that a consideration in planning access to the pieces?
I think with the first iteration of dwelling here, there's this series of photos. I don't think we thought about that. I think in the second iteration in Virginia, I don't think we thought clearly enough about it. Universally. So I have to admit that that's an area I should improve. I can tell you that I am aware of the differences between, someone who's super tall and super short, and I try to plan around that.
Mm-hmm.
If you were in a wheelchair, I don't think it's possible, because you are standing to take a look at these sites. Just a sec, Rob has a comment. Is Hyde Park accessible? Yeah, there is a cabinet, okay, in Hyde Park in Toronto in an area that was designed to be accessible. So that particular cabinet is also at a standing height of the average 12-year-old. Is that good enough to accommodate a wheelchair? Likely. It might depend on how large the person in the wheelchair, like if they're an adult or if they're tall or short.
Well, it's something to think about.
It is, and it's
It's a good question.
yeah.
And Bonnie asks, the vertical tunnels and swirls are amazing. Do you find that some bees prefer to use the up and down tunnels versus the horizontal ones?
Yeah, it's such a fun thing to observe. I find that different bees seem to have different strategies of nesting at any given time. And it's kind of, I haven't been able to find a preference. I found bees that will, and wasps that'll just kind of do just about anything. And I don't know why they're doing it. So some will want to place a dib on as many tunnels as possible. So they'll start a nest way back and then plug the front so no one else can get in. And they do have a limit to how far they seem to be willing to go up that curlicue, right? I could mention to you that this photo right now is showing the multiple layers of clay, clay-rich earth mixes that we did in Maryland, the first iteration of dwelling. It's really quite beautiful. And I cannot tell you if definitively the bees preferred one over the other. And so, sometimes my goal is to set up a situation where the venue can keep track, but it's up to the venue to keep track. That doesn't mean there is an answer. We did have to plaster over that because it started to melt, but that's what's underneath. And I want to show you this. It's a little bit hard to see. So I actually did make a drawing that shows what's where based on my notes. And so here it was super sandy. I did that on purpose to see if they wanted it. They don't seem to want the super sandy. But in field studies, they are willing to go in super sandy mixes in some places. They seem to be okay with a wide variety of things. They tolerate a lot of variation, it seems. And so I just wanted to share this drawing with you.
Very cool. So Ava also says regarding accessibility that she could pass on some resources, and this would be great for sight impaired folks, which I think is a cool idea too.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Yeah, so I think this is good. If anyone else has a burning question that they would like to ask, if they wanted to raise their hand, and instead of putting it in the chat, I would be happy to help facilitate that. Just looking if anyone wants to do that. I don't see any. This was a fantastic presentation, and I just would love to see one of these in every park, every backyard. They're just, I can't imagine coming upon them. It just must be such a magical experience. And I mean, I would want to spend hours there. It was just so amazing. So I really want to thank you for your sharing your work with us.
It's my pleasure.
And I really hope that you can create one of these in BC. Boy, I sure would love to see one. So
Yes.
all the best with your future endeavors.
Thank you very much. And thank you for inviting me. It's an honor.
Pleasure.
To be invited. Yeah.
Awesome. Really great. And maybe we'll have you back next year.
and I just should say BC is a goal, and I am currently exploring ways of doing this that are a little less complex, ways of making bee habitats on a table, right? That don't require
Yes.
the structural integrity of a wall. And
Yeah, yeah.
it's always an opportunity to explore and create, right?
And I also wanted to mention that we are putting a call for collaboration that you're putting out for another exciting project, which is going to be in our
It's true.
newsletter. So do you want to just talk a little bit about that, or do you want to leave it a surprise?
I can't put it in a nutshell,
Okay.
but do you think that we should see if anyone else has any questions or
Well, so far
What do you
I'm
wanna
seeing
do?
we don't have any questions. I think we're good for
Okay.
now.
Mhm.
So I think this has been fantastic, and thank you so much for sharing your Sunday afternoon with us. Really appreciate it.
My
And I'm
pleasure.
just going to wrap up by saying that Bonnie is going to talk about what's happening in the next couple of days. So Bonnie, are you there?
I actually don't see your faces.
She
do we
will
see
come
your
up in a
faces
sec.
again?
She'll come up in a second. There.
Okay.
There.
I am here. I just have to say, thank you, Sarah. That was amazing. And I now
You're
have
welcome.
a new project to start thinking about. We're definitely going to have a bee cabinet at my house this summer.
Oh, good.
If you have plans somewhere for how to do this, let us know, or else we'll be
Oh, yeah.
bunch of
I don't actually. It was just, a couple of basic words, dark and dry. You make a cabinet, you make it dark, you make it dry, and figure out a way to take your plank out and put another one in. And of
Okay.
course, then you got to put your plank after 2 years or whatever, 3 years, put it in an emergence chamber. So, and like that, how you figure out how to do that is going to be your challenge. Because honestly, I don't have any plans. Nothing's been put down. Yeah.
Well, it's fascinating. I would love to be able to go out every day and open a cabinet and see what the bees been up to. So
It is super fun. It's just super fun. Yeah.
yeah. So thank you again. There's a couple things that Lori already mentioned coming up this week. So tomorrow at 7:30, if you are interested in learning how to learn more about different kinds of bees and studying them and what sorts of flowers they use, we're going to have an introduction to the Master Melittologist program coming from Oregon State University, which is an online program that you can work through and learn a bunch more about bees. And then we're going to have some BC components we're going to add to that. And I'll throw a link to that in the chat. So anybody who's interested, please do sign up and come. And then the other event that we have happening on Wednesday is the Native Bee Study Group. And so this is a new project we're trying to have with the Native Bee Society, where we can get together once a month and talk about bees and cool bees we've seen and cool bees we want to see, and just share what we're learning and nerd out about bees together. So Link can bring his video of bees shooting water out their butts. And so this month, our topic is going to be kind of looking back over our last year and thinking about the best bee photos we saw, our favorite moments, something really cool you saw. It can be a really cool kind of bee. It can just be really cool because it's a bee cabinet you built in your yard and bees came and lived in it. There's no standards here. We just want to find out what you're excited about. And I will put the link to that in the chat as well. And I would encourage you to RSVP for that. And then we've got a communal slideshow that you'll get the link to. And so you can add your photos to the slideshow, and then we'll all have a chance to look through those and you can tell us about them. If you have any questions about what you're seeing, you can say, what's going on here? What bee is this? And if you already know a whole bunch about what it is, you can tell us because we want to know. And I will throw that link in there.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
I just wanted to ask Link if he would send me a link to this video so I can share it with Ty. And then Ty Ralston will share it with the Blandy community.
Awesome. I love these connections. Woohoo! This is great. Thanks, Bonnie. I also wanted to say that we are going to have more art salon activities. I've got an idea for a participatory artist salon for all ages coming up. So watch for that. So that connection between art and science and bees is going to continue. So I thought this was a very good leaping off point from that.
Okay.
Awesome. So everybody have a really great afternoon, and thank you so much, Sarah.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Lori, and
Awesome.
everybody at the society.
Nice to see your smile.
Good to see
Thank you,
you.
Sarah.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, folks.